Adrian, and welcome to the very first episode of Fighting Skills. In this brand new series, we take an in-depth look at a character's fighting style, not in terms of how many they know, but how effectively they handle themselves in a fight. In other words, how complete of a fighter the character in question is. For the first episode, I figured it would be appropriate to start with the character that began the entire fighting style series, and that is Batman from the DC Extended Universe. This video assumes that you saw his movies in the DC Extended Universe, as well as his corresponding fighting styles video. If you haven't seen his fighting styles video, it's in the description below and on the fighting styles playlist. This video will analyze Batman's fighting skills from the fight scenes in Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad, and Justice League. In order to keep things as objective as possible, each fighter will receive a fighting skills rating, which is comprised of several categories that all have a weighted value. Those categories are Martial Arts Prowess, which accounts for 28% of the overall score. This basically applies to the fighter's knowledge of martial arts and how well he or she uses this knowledge given the scenario at hand. Situational Awareness, which accounts for 12% of the overall score. In a fight, and especially a fight against multiple opponents, you need to be extremely aware of your surroundings, not just what is right in front of you. This also applies to reading your opponent's movements. Technique, Strength, and Speed, which comprises 15% of the overall score. As its name implies, this is all about measurable feats displaying the fighter's strength and speed. And to clarify, this is relative to the fighter at hand. I won't deduct points because one fighter can crush boulders and another one can't. In the same vein, speed is only relative to the fighter being discussed. Superman, for example, won't automatically be the only one who receives maximum points here. Defense, which accounts for 15% of the score. Being a good fighter is not just about dishing out pain, it's about learning how to absorb, deflect, and dodge hits as well. Use of superpowers, which accounts for 10% of the score. This one also needs to be clarified. If a character doesn't have any literal superpowers, this applies to using the abilities or gadgets that make them special. Iron Man is just a man in a can, as he says so himself, but his suit is his superpower. Conditioning and stamina is worth 10%. When a fighter is in a prolonged fight, he or she may show signs of fatigue. Does he or she make any careless mistakes because of it? Intelligence is worth 10%. You need to fight smart to fight effectively. How informed are the fighter's decisions surrounding the conflict? With the categories established, let's begin. A well-known fact about Batman is that he is one of the most talented fighters in all of comic book mythology. Since he has no actual superpowers like flight, he has had to rely on his martial arts prowess to take out villains. This attribute applies to this film interpretation as well. It can especially be seen in the Batman vs Superman warehouse fight scene. It is a cornucopia of martial arts techniques that are used extremely effectively in battle to take out his enemies, whether they are striking techniques, grappling techniques, disarms, counters, throws. Batman is skilled in any category of fighting and will use the best techniques suited to the situation. One such excellent use of martial arts occurs in this situation right here. His enemy has a cooking grenade in his hand, but Batman is too far off to just tackle him. So what does he do? He uses a hanging enemy beside him and roundhouse kicks him into the man using the grenade. The grenade goes off and he is left unscathed. Furthermore, this particular roundhouse kick shows influence not only from Taekwondo, but Muay Thai as well. What he did here was kick through the target as opposed to just at it. He let his full mass, speed, and inertia flow through the technique in order to obtain maximum power with it. Another great instance of him using his knowledge of martial arts occurs right here with this knife attack. Notice how after neutralizing the attack, he simply turns it into an excellent throw and takedown, eliminating the henchman from the fight. Elements of his martial arts prowess carry over to Justice League as well. When dealing with an overpowered alien warrior, his first move is to rid him of his weapon. He does this by executing an out-to-in block, or inside block as it's known in Taekwondo. Note that in some styles, such as Shotokan Karate, this is known as an outside block. What makes it especially effective with Batman is that he's using the spikes from his gauntlet to amplify the technique. He follows this up with a disarm, and when he sees his opening, he flies in with an elbow using his spikes on his gauntlet once again, injuring the parademon in the process. His martial arts skills line up perfectly with his exceptional strength and speed. Note how he was able to send this fully grown man flying back several feet with a perfectly timed and quickly executed punch. But just how strong was that punch? For that, we're going to go a bit into physics. Note that this is based on ballpark observational numbers, but it will be further corroborated with official movie data. So in other words, this is my best estimation into Batman's strength coupled with some research and advice from a physicist and mathematician. What we're going to be looking into is transfer of momentum. So in other words, Batman makes an impact with an unknown velocity over a period of t seconds, and in doing so, that change in momentum gets transferred to the guy he punches. Here's where our first variable that we can estimate comes up. Batman punches this guy, but what is his mass? We don't know for sure, but based on his build, I'll be going with 85 kilograms. I have a martial artist friend who has a very similar build. That's where I got this number. Returning to our calculation, the unknown is what his initial velocity is when the henchman flies back. For this, we're going to be using a projectile motion calculator that can give you variables you don't know using the ones you do know. We're going to be estimating that the initial height of this impact is at about 1.5 meters. This is based on the center of mass of the henchman. We will further estimate that he flew a distance of about 4 meters before he hit the ground and slid the rest of the way. To get this figure of 4 meters, I based it on what I could observe from the scene. Using a projectile motion calculator, it lets us know that based on these figures, his initial velocity as soon as he got hit by Batman was 7.2 meters per second. Now that we have a bit more information, we can start working on getting Batman's force in newtons. So to get the force in newtons, we use this equation, which means force equals mass times change in velocity over time. In our case, that is 85 kilograms times 7.2 meters per second over t or time. So what number gets plugged into that t slot? For that, we need the average contact time of the punch. According to a paper by Charlton B. on the theoretical estimation of punch velocities, the average contact time of a punch is 0.1 seconds or 100 milliseconds. So now we have all the parts we need to calculate his force, yielding us with a number of 6,120 newtons of force, or about 1,376 pounds of force. This lines up with the official data given to us by the special feature in the Batman vs Superman Blu-ray, The Might and the Power of a Punch, which unequivocally states that Batman, with his armored suit on, has a punching power of 1,420 pounds of force, or about 6,360 newtons. In other words, there's an 196 newton or 44 pounds of force increase when he puts the armored suit on. This makes sense that it's not an astronomical increase in force, since Zack Snyder himself stated that the suit was not primarily meant to enhance Batman's strength, but it was meant to increase his defense and help him sustain the damage from Superman's attacks. And Batman made a great call here to focus on his defensive abilities, as he was super shoved and tackled through a literal building. Moving on, other displays of Batman's insane strength include Batman slamming this other man flat on the ground with yet another perfectly executed punch. He threw another man against the wall and knocked him out for good. He was even able to barrel through a wall with nothing but his massive frame. Furthermore, he was strong enough to lob a box over his head, using the grappling hook as a sort of twisted fishing hook. In short, there is no question that Batman is at peak human condition. An area in which Batman somewhat falters in is his situational awareness. It varies from time to time and is not as consistent as you would think. He uses his environment extremely well sometimes, such as using the aforementioned box as a weapon against his enemies, or dropping on top of this parademon from above, taking advantage of the fact that he had the high ground, and thus making Obi-Wan Kenobi extremely happy in the process. He also uses his enemy's assault rifle to make his enemies drop to the ground. However, in his older age, he has unfortunately come to depend a little too much on the effectiveness of his cowl in protecting himself from gunshots and knife slashes. He is slashed on the head during the warehouse fight. He's also shot at point blank from behind, and even shot at point blank by Deadshot in Suicide Squad. In the warehouse fight, he's kicked in the face, pulled to the ground, kicked again, and stabbed. Yet another series of attacks on him that were due to his lack of situational awareness. This drop in awareness is happening near the end of the fight, which means that Batman was starting to experience some fatigue and loss of stamina. This contrast is seen because earlier on he was fighting and defending himself against several enemies at the same time. This loss of stamina is also seen during the Nightmare sequence. Although he starts off with a plethora of strength and speed and quickly disarming his opponents and whacking them as well as shooting them with guns, nearing the end, Batman once again starts getting progressively tired and is overwhelmed by his attackers. What this points to is that Batman, although extremely fit for his age, does get tired during a prolonged fisticuffs. If you're enjoying this video so far, please subscribe and consider donating to my Patreon. As little as $1 helps me out tremendously in being able to make more videos for you guys. If you donate, you'll also get really cool rewards as well, such as finding out which are my upcoming videos and getting your name in the credits. We now make a transition into discussing his defensive skills. Batman is extremely versatile in dealing with attackers, and a grand majority of his attacks result from counters. For example, This man attempting to tackle him gets his tackle redirected and pays for it dearly. This knife attack is turned into a defensive takedown. He defends himself from multiple attackers and sneaks in shots whenever he can. Furthermore, when he's knocked down, he doesn't just give up, he resorts to a defensive technique known as shrimping. This is extremely useful for when you need to push yourself away from your opponent, but you're still on the floor and unable to stand up. Furthermore, as soon as he reads an opening from one of his opponents, he counterattacks by kicking low and then kneeing his other opponent, allowing himself to get back up shortly thereafter. During the nightmare scene, he's also constantly defending himself from his attackers and using their bodies as literal shields from incoming bullets. However, as discussed earlier, his defensive abilities drop considerably as he gets tired, leading to decreased situational awareness, which means he opens himself up to getting shot, stabbed, pulled to the ground, or knocked out, or even thrown around like a ragdoll by a parademon, among other things. But Batman never gives up, even in the most dire of situations, and that is when he relies on his superpowers. In this case, no, I'm not talking about the facetious comment to The Flash, in which he remarks that his superpower is just money. I'm talking about the figurative superpower that he has, and that is using his money and intelligence along with Alfred's assistance to construct an unending supply of gadgets and vehicles that he uses during his fights. He frequently uses his grappling gun, whether it be to tether a guy and later punch him across a room, or to tether himself to a better vantage point when avoiding heavy attacks, such as Doomsdays, or just to execute drop kicks. This extends itself to the Batarang, which he also uses in fights, as well as his special gadget, which effectively blows up parademons. His battle with Superman was filled to the brim with Batman tech, including the traps before the fight even started. He also used his armored Batman suit, or mech suit if you're going off the terminology used in the official Batman vs Superman tech manual. But his most effective weapons were his lead gas grenades, which prevented Superman from using his X-ray vision, as well as his kryptonite gas grenade launcher, and not to mention the kryptonite spear he built that ended up being key in stopping Doomsday. Besides his gadgets and suits, even his vehicles or weapons themselves to be used against his enemies. The Batmobile is pretty much an impenetrable tank, except when it comes to Superman, of course. It's equipped with its own tether and upgradable weapon system. His Batwing also assists in clearing the field leading up to the warehouse fight, and the Nightcrawler helps in the battle against Steppenwolf. In short, his fights are not only demonstrating his superior skills in martial arts, they also definitively illustrate and incorporate his gadgets and vehicles, which are essentially his superpowers. This leads us nicely into the next category, which is intelligence. In Batman's case, not only does he display his intelligence in making his gadgets, he has the same sort of analytical approach to when he's in a fight. He prepared for a huge amount of time on how to bring down Superman. He pretty much planned out to a T to end up exactly where he placed that kryptonite spear to end Superman, and was smart enough not to go through with it. He smartly attacked a group of thugs guarding Superman's mother from the second floor and used his gadgets to disorient them and disarm most of them before heading into the fray properly. He even broke through a weak wall in order to grab a weapon that would assist him in freeing Martha. Furthermore, throughout his fights, he displays a serious ability to read his opponent's movements in order to effectively disarm them and incapacitate them. Given this analysis, let's see how Batman fares in his fighting skills rating. In martial arts prowess, Batman gets a full 28 out of 28 points. He is a master in several fighting styles, and uses each and every one of them extremely effectively given the scenario. In situational awareness, Batman scores 6 out of 12 points. Although Batman can handle fighting multiple enemies, he does tend to make major mistakes in this area, resulting in him getting shot, stabbed, slashed, and even pulled to the ground. In strength and speed, Batman receives 15 out of 15 points. Batman is a regular human being executing superhuman tasks with the strength he displays in his battles. Furthermore, his techniques are strong because they are executed so quickly. In defense, Batman receives 12 out of 15 points. Batman can successfully defend himself and counterattack extremely well, but his defense is not perfect. As mentioned in the situational awareness category, he is susceptible to potentially life-ending hits. In use of superpowers, Batman receives a 10 out of 10 points. Batman uses each and every one of his gadget suits and vehicles to his advantage and never hesitates to even the odds with his opponents with them. In conditioning and stamina, Batman receives a 7 out of 10. The fact that he can last so long fighting in a thick suit with virtually no loss of speed and strength is admirable. However, he is susceptible to getting tired in a fight, which subsequently affects his situational awareness as well as his defense. In intelligence, Batman receives a 10 out of 10. He's a brilliant fighter, strategist, and leader, all indicating his extremely high IQ. So in conclusion, what is Batman's fighting skills rating? Out of 100 possible points, Batman from the DC Extended Universe receives a fighting skills rating of 88! I'd like to thank each one of my Patreon members as their contribution helped in the making of this video. If you'd like to contribute and appear in the credits in the future, my Patreon page is Godzillarex and it's in the description below. What other fighters should I analyze next? What did you think of the series? Let me know in the comments below and see you next time.